Welcome to Life Stories. Imagine being erased by the people who should love you the most, not through words, but with silence. What do you do when your mother, the one who promised to always have your back, sends you a message that cuts deeper than any insult? When the family you've tried so hard to belong to forgets you ever existed? This is the story of Jake, a man who learned that love doesn't always come with loyalty. A man who walked away from everything he knew to build a life where he wasn't just seen, but valued. But when the past comes knocking, can you really leave it behind? Stay with us as Jake faces a choice that will change everything, and learn what happens when you stop waiting for the approval that never comes. Jake had always been the kind of person who blended into the background, not by choice, but by necessity. The factory was where he found his rhythm, steady, predictable, silent. He ran the same injection molding machine day after day, its hum becoming the soundtrack to his life. A life that, on the surface, seemed simple and unremarkable. But there was always something more lurking just beneath the surface, something no one could see, not even his family. His fingers had long become familiar with the cold metal of the machine, the smell of melted plastic mixing with the bitter tang of motor oil. The sound of the machine's relentless clicking no longer registered in his mind. It had become white noise, just like the world around him. At night, when the hum of the factory stopped, Jake sat alone in his small apartment, scrolling through his phone, wondering if he would ever get out of this cycle. The factory, the lonely nights, the empty text messages from family that never came. But he hadn't always been this way. Years ago, Jake had been the golden child, the one who had the potential to escape. A scholarship to a prestigious university had been his ticket out of this town, out of this life. But the death of his father changed everything. It was his mother, Linda, who needed him now. There were things that only a son could do, and Jake, the dutiful son, stayed. He stayed when he should have gone. He turned down the scholarship, choosing to work at the factory instead, thinking it was the right thing to do, thinking his mother would understand. After all, he was loyal. He was trying to keep the family together. But loyalty, he soon realized, only counted when it flowed upward in their house. His mother, the woman who had always told him he was meant for greatness, had no use for a factory worker. And so with one simple message on Mother's Day, she erased him. "To all my successful children," it read, listing his siblings, Mark, Alice, Kelly, and then at the bottom, "I no longer count him among my children." The words burned, even though they were written with the calmness of someone who had long since made peace with their decision. Jake stared at the screen for what felt like hours, but no tears came. Just a cold, hollow feeling in the pit of his stomach. He wasn't just excluded, he had been erased. And the silence that followed from his family was worse than the message itself. No one reached out, no one asked where he was. He was invisible, just like he had always feared. The silence was a judgment, and it spoke louder than anything his mother had ever said. Jake didn't reply. Instead, he deleted the family group chat, blocked notifications, archived the photos. He didn't rage. He didn't confront anyone. He simply disappeared. There was no dramatic exit, no angry words, just the quietest form of survival he could muster. And in that silence, something in him snapped. Not violently, but with the clarity of someone who had spent years chasing validation from the wrong people. The days that followed felt strangely freeing. Without the weight of his family's expectations, he began to rebuild himself. He worked extra shifts, took night classes, learned things he never thought he could learn. He wasn't trying to make anyone proud anymore. He wasn't chasing approval. But with every book he read, every skill he mastered, he became something else, something more. It was during this time that Jake met Mira. She worked in logistics, quiet but sharp, the kind of woman who didn't ask questions unless she'd earned the right to hear the answers. They met by chance, over a jammed printer. What started as a small joke about toner soon turned into late-night coffee in parking lots after long shifts. Mira didn't ask him about his family. She didn't push him to talk about what had happened. She simply let him be. And that, Jake realized, was exactly what he needed. The months went by, and as Jake grew stronger, the weight of his past began to lift. He picked up extra shifts, earned promotions. People at the factory began noticing the quiet confidence in his work, the way he solved problems no one else wanted to touch. When the old line manager retired, Jake was offered the job. The transition was smooth. No one questioned his qualifications. He was just the guy who got things done. But Jake knew that he wasn't just climbing the ranks in the factory, he was building something that no one could take away from him. And then, one day, the call came. It was his mother. Her voice was bright, casual, as if the years of silence between them had never happened. She spoke of the article. Jake's success had made local news. "I always knew you had potential," she said, as if he had simply been waiting for the right time to show it. She told him how proud she was, how everyone in the family was talking about him. Jake's heart didn't race. He didn't feel angry or hurt. He simply listened, allowing her words to wash over him. The woman who had erased him from her life was now trying to reclaim him, but not for who he was. No, she wanted him as a trophy, a symbol of success she could proudly display. And then the moment of truth came. Jake didn't yell, didn't curse. He simply said, in the calmest voice he could muster, "Please don't call me again." He hung up the phone. Mira was there, waiting. She didn't ask what had happened. She didn't need to. She just placed her hand on his shoulder, and Jake, for the first time in years, felt the weight of his past slip away completely. But that wasn't the end. The next day, his mother showed up at his office. She had no appointment, no reason to be there. She simply assumed that after all these years, he would let her back in. But she was wrong. Jake's assistant buzzed in, informing him that his mother was downstairs. He didn't hesitate. He instructed security to escort her out. She tried to argue, tried to call his name, but Jake didn't move. He didn't need to. The message was clear. His past had no place in his present. What would you do if the person who erased you from their life suddenly reappeared, seeking your approval? Would you allow them back in, or would you walk away for good? The truth is that some people are only capable of seeing you when it's convenient for them. Jake had learned that the hard way, but now he had built a life where the only validation that mattered came from within. But the battle wasn't over. He would have to face the past again, and the stakes were higher than ever. What would happen when the people who once discarded you finally recognized your worth? Jake hadn't expected the message from his sister. Alice, the one who had never been fully on his side, the one who always straddled the line between loyalty to their mother and affection for him. Her text, as simple as it was, felt like a trap. "I know what happened. Mom's been talking about you. She's sorry. She wants to make things right." He stared at the words, letting them hang there in the silence of his office, the hum of his computer the only sound in the room. The factory outside was alive with its daily rhythm. No one knew what had just been thrust into his lap. The old familiar ache of rejection twisted in his chest, but this time it wasn't the sting of being erased. It was something more complicated, something worse. He had thought he was done. He thought he had buried the past beneath the weight of his success, beneath the quiet satisfaction of building something real. But this message, this simple, hollow olive branch, dragged him back. The familiar pull of family, of duty, of the little boy who had always longed for approval, crept back into his veins. He wasn't sure he could do this again. Could he forgive? Could he go back to a world where he was never enough? Mira noticed the shift in him immediately. They were sitting at the kitchen table, a quiet dinner between them, the soft glow of the overhead light casting a peaceful warmth across the room. Their daughter, Emma, was drawing in the corner, her little hands moving quickly as she tried to capture the image of a cat. But Jake's thoughts weren't on the picture. "You got a message," Mira said, her voice steady but curious. "Is everything okay?" He put the phone down without a word, staring at the screen as if it might somehow hold the answers he didn't want to face. He had never told Mira the full story of what had happened with his family. She knew the basics, knew that his mother had turned her back on him, but she didn't know how deep the wound went. How long Jake had spent trying to fit into a mold that was never meant for him. She reached over, touching his hand gently. "You're thinking about it, aren't you?" Jake nodded, his throat tight. I don't know. I don't know if I can keep pretending I'm okay with it. It's not just about me anymore, Mira. It's about Emma. What if she has to face this one day? What if I can't protect her from them? Mira didn't answer immediately. She just sat there, her thumb gently stroking his hand, the kind of quiet support that she always offered when words weren't enough. Jake looked over at Emma, her innocent face lit by the flickering light of the television, unaware of the turmoil swirling around her. He had promised himself, time and time again, that Emma would never have to deal with the mess of family dynamics that had haunted him for so long. But he was beginning to realize that no matter how much he tried to shield her, the past had a way of finding its way into the present. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was his mother. The text was more direct, more desperate. "I was wrong, Jake. I've made mistakes, and I want to make it right. Please, let's talk. For Emma's sake." Jake's hand tightened around the phone, the words echoing in his mind. For Emma's sake, not for his. Not for the years he had spent in silence, wondering if he was ever good enough. She wanted to use his daughter as a reason to fix things. And in a way, it made him sick. "I don't know what to do, Mira," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "I built a life here. I'm finally free of all that. But now it feels like I'm being pulled back into it. Back into her world." Mira's voice was soft but unwavering. "You're not that boy anymore, Jake. You're not the one who bends to anyone's will. You're a father now. You get to decide who gets to be part of your life. And I think you already know what the right choice is." Jake looked at her, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. It wasn't just about his mother anymore. It was about the kind of man he wanted to be for his daughter. It was about breaking the cycle. The cycle of disappointment, of abandonment, of constant proving. But just as he was about to respond, his phone rang. It was his mother, calling for the first time in years. His thumb hovered over the screen, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He could answer. He could hear her out. Maybe, just maybe, they could fix things. Maybe he could finally hear the apology he had been waiting for all his life. But then he looked at Mira. He looked at Emma. He realized something deep in his bones. He wasn't waiting for her anymore. He wasn't waiting for her to validate him. He had spent too many years doing that. And now he was the one in control. His hand dropped and he put the phone on silent. "That's it, isn't it?" Mira asked, her voice thick with understanding. Jake nodded slowly, a calm settling over him that he hadn't felt in years. "Yeah, it's over." But even as the words left his mouth, he knew it wasn't truly over. His mother wouldn't give up that easily. She would try again, maybe through guilt, that maybe through the press, or maybe through family. But Jake had already made up his mind. He would protect the life he had built, the family he had chosen, no matter what. How much are you willing to sacrifice for closure? How far would you go to protect the life you've built, even if it means losing the people who should have loved you? Jake thought he had put the past behind him, but when the past comes knocking, it doesn't always leave easily. Can he keep moving forward? Or will he be forced to confront the ghosts of his past one final time? The next chapter awaits. The doorbell rang just as Jake was finishing dinner. He could hear Emma laughing in the other room, her voice echoing through the quiet house, a sound that always reminded him how far he had come from the broken boy who once begged for his family's love. Mira looked at him, her expression unreadable. She had known, from the moment the phone rang, that this would come. Jake stood up slowly, the weight of the decision pressing heavily against his chest. He walked to the door, his hand on the handle, but his mind was already 1,000 miles away, lost in memories he'd long since locked away. He could almost hear his mother's voice in his head again, the same tone she had used for years, that unmistakable calm that never failed to make him feel like he was beneath her. "Jake, please, just listen to me for once," she had said over the phone. But now, standing at the door, Jake wasn't the boy who had once hoped for her approval. He wasn't the child who had desperately wanted to belong. He was a man, forged in silence and struggle, and he had learned how to live without her. When he opened the door, there she was, Linda, his mother. She stood there in front of him, as composed as ever, but with a nervous edge in her eyes. Her polished appearance, the carefully controlled smile, it was all still there. But it was different now. He could see it, feel it in the air between them. She had come to reclaim him, to take back the son she had erased from her life. She was still wearing the armor she had always worn, but the cracks were starting to show. "Jake," she said, her voice low, soft. "I know I've made mistakes, but I've realized I was wrong. I've missed you. I've missed my son." Her words, so familiar, so laced with regret, did not carry the weight they once had. He didn't feel that tug anymore. No longing, no ache, just emptiness. It wasn't because he didn't care. It was because he had learned not to need her love anymore. The man in front of her wasn't the same child she had once rejected. "I don't need you to apologize," Jake said quietly, his eyes steady on hers. "I don't need anything from you." Linda blinked, her smile faltering for just a moment. The words hung in the air like an accusation. He could see the familiar flicker of hurt flash across her face, but it was quickly masked, replaced by something colder. She had expected this. Expected him to crumble, to fall back into his old place, but Jake had built himself a new life, one where he didn't need to be anyone's validation. "You're angry," she said, her voice tight now. "I understand that, but we're family. You can't just cut me out of your life. Not forever." Jake looked at her, his expression unreadable. He had spent so many years fighting for a place at her table, for recognition, for love. He had convinced himself that it was all worth it, that one day she would see him. But that day never came. And now, standing here, he realized something deep within him. He had stopped waiting for that approval. "I don't think you understand," Jake said, his voice calm but firm. "Family is more than just blood. It's about loyalty. It's about being there, even when it's hard. I've learned that the hard way. But I've also learned that it's okay to walk away from toxic people, even if they're your family." Linda took a step back, her hands trembling ever so slightly. The walls she had built around herself, the control she had so carefully maintained, were crumbling in the face of Jake's unyielding resolve. For the first time, she seemed small, vulnerable. "You've changed," she whispered, almost to herself. "You've become someone I don't recognize." "Maybe that's a good thing," Jake replied, his voice soft but resolute. "Because the person you used to know wasn't the real me." For a moment, the silence between them was thick with unsaid words, the weight of the years hanging heavily in the air. Jake knew what was coming. He knew the next words out of her mouth would be a final plea, a last-ditch attempt to pull him back into the family he had once desperately wanted to be part of. "Jake, I don't want to die alone," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've spent so many years trying to be everything to everyone, trying to make sure everyone was happy. But now I'm alone. I don't want to be alone anymore." Jake stood still, the words hanging in the air. He wasn't sure what he expected from this moment, but he knew one thing for sure. He had already moved on. He wasn't going to let her drag him back into the past, not when he had finally found peace in his own life, his own family. He stepped back, opening the door wider. "You're not alone, Mom. But I can't be the son you want me to be. I can't be the one you turn to when you need someone. I've built my own life, and I'm finally free." She stared at him, the hurt, the shock, the disbelief all over her face. And for the first time, Jake felt no guilt. He wasn't ashamed. He wasn't the boy who had begged for love anymore. He was a man who had learned to stand on his own 2 feet. "I'm sorry," she whispered, and for a moment Jake almost believed it. But then the moment passed, and he realized her apology didn't matter. Not anymore. "I'm not," he said, his voice steady. "Goodbye, Mom." As he closed the door, he didn't feel relief. He didn't feel joy. He felt something deeper, something that had been missing for so long. Peace. It wasn't a peace born of resolution or forgiveness. It was a peace born of finally letting go. Later that night, as Mira and Jake tucked Emma into bed, Jake stood in the doorway, watching his daughter fall asleep with a peaceful smile on her face. This, he realized, was all that mattered. This was his family, the one he had built, the one that loved him without conditions, the one that saw him for who he truly was, not who they wanted him to be. And that was enough. What does family really mean to you? Is it about blood, or is it about loyalty and love? If you found yourself in Jake's shoes, Would you be able to walk away from the past and protect the future you've built? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Comment 100 if you loved this story. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to share this video with your friends. Thank you for watching Life Stories.